Welcome back to Evolution Woodworks. Today we're going to build this basket weave end grain cutting board, and I'm going to show you how it's done. Stick around. To get things started, I pulled some maple off the shelf and ran it through the planer to get it down to rough size. You may notice I've finally got my planer on a stand so I can stop picking it up off the floor every time I need to use it. It's actually a pretty nice stand I just picked up off of Amazon. I'll leave a link down in the description if you want to check that out. After I passed through the joiner to square up one edge, I ran it through the table saw to get everything down the width, then moved on to some walnut. The walnut pieces only need to be about 1/4 of an inch when I'm finished, so I ran them through the bandsaw and then onto the drum sander to flatten them out. I left them a little bit thick. That'll leave a little bit of room to work with later as I try to square everything up and keep all the parts even. For the first glue up, I'll need 6 pieces consisting of 1 piece of maple glued between 2 pieces of walnut. To make it easier, I'm going to glue everything up in one set of clamps, making sure not to glue any of the walnut parts together. After the glue's set for a little bit, I come back and scrape it off while it's still a little bit wet, just to make it easier to clean up after it's dried. After the glue sets overnight, I take everything over to the joiner, square up one edge, then head over to the table saw to get everything ripped to rough width. I'll cut everything a little bit large on the table saw, that way I can take it to the drum sander and get everything down to final sizes. At this point, you need your blocks to be perfect squares, so I'll run them through the sander on all 4 sides, making sure to alternate the walnuts so that one side doesn't become thinner than the other. Now we can lay out our second glue up with alternating horizontal and vertical blocks. Now you can see why we need the perfect squares, as otherwise we wouldn't have a flat panel when we're done. After a night in the clamps, it's back to the sander to flatten things out again. After everything's sanded smooth, I move back to the table saw with the crosscut sled. From there, I'll square up an edge, set my stop block, and cut all my end grain strips to size. Typically cut all these strips about 1/8 inch longer than I need them to be, so that once everything's glued up, I have plenty of room to sand things down to the final thickness. Now we can lay everything out for the last glue up. Once again, alternating boards, this time swapping every other one end for end. This is where we can finally see our basket weave pattern come to life. At this point, I realized that one of the pieces was just ever so slightly thinner than the other ones, so I decided to pull it out. I had an extra piece, so I just replaced it with that one. Did you catch that? Well, I thought I was fixing something, and here's what I did. So, when I pulled that one out, I actually told myself to make sure I put it back in the way it was supposed to be, and still flipped it around backwards. So we're going to take the piece that I thought I was taking out, cut this piece out, and see if we can glue it back in. I could just cut it off right here and make it a shorter board, but I kind of like the dimensions of this one, so let's see if we can fix it. I went back over to the crosscut sled and cut out the backwards piece, leaving just a little bit extra on the two pieces that were remaining so that I could adjust a little bit without messing up the pattern. Then I ran the end piece and the replacement piece back through the sander to clean up the edges and get any glue off that might have been there. All right, with that piece cut out, got a good smooth surface on there. I can go ahead and glue this piece back in. Let's make sure we get it right this time. After a night in the clamps, it's back over to the drum sander to flatten everything out before moving on to the random orbital sander. I set my joiner to take off maybe the thickness of a piece of paper, then ran several passes through just to get the edges all aligned, make sure all the blocks were even. After sanding everything to 180, I moved over to the router table and used a 1/4-inch radius bit to round over all the edges. I used a little bit larger bit here than I normally do. I felt the extra radius would help bring the pattern down over the edges. After all the edges were rounded over, it was back to the workbench for a few more rounds of water popping and sanding before finishing up by hand. Once all the sanding's finished, it's time for a nice relaxing soak in the tub. After a couple minutes absorbing the mineral oil, I'll move it over to the drying rack for a couple days. Then I'll come back, wipe on a couple coats of board butter, and buff everything out with a microfiber cloth. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this one. I think this is actually a good entry point for someone who's looking to get into pattern cutting boards. You only have 2 wood species to deal with, and it's just basically rectangles, so you don't have to worry about trying to line up a bunch of angles and weird diamond shapes and all that. So If you'd like a set of plans for this board, I'll have a set linked down in the description. You can go over to our website and pick those up, or if you just like to pick up a pre-made cutting board, we have all of those over there on the website too. So go check that out, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.